You always hear that a falling unemployment rate is a great sign for the economy, right? But what if that good news is actually hiding a much more complicated and honestly, a kind of worrying story? Today, we're going to unpack the surprising twist behind one of the most important numbers in economics. And here it is, the latest US unemployment rate, 4.3%. Now, on the surface, this looks fantastic. This is the kind of number that gets markets excited. It suggests tons of people are finding jobs. It basically signals that everything's chugging along just fine. But this is the question at the very heart of what we're talking about today. What if that good news is just an illusion? What if the unemployment rate is falling for a reason that has nothing to do with a strong economy, but everything to do with a shrinking workforce? To really get this, you have to look at the entire puzzle, because while that 4.3% number looks great all by itself, other key signals from the 2025 jobs reports are pointing in a completely different direction. The pieces, well, they just aren't fitting together. And here's where it gets weird. Normally, when unemployment goes down, you see booming job creation, tons of openings. But that is not what's happening. Net job growth for the year was actually revised down, and job openings, they declined. This doesn't really scream healthy economy. It screams that something fundamental is changing. So what is that something? It's a shrinking labor pool. The main reason for all this strange data is that the total supply of workers in the United States has actually started to get smaller, which leads to the big question: where did everybody go?
The answer, when you dig into the data, is a huge shift in migration patterns. It seems that since January of 2025, the flow of people coming to the U.S. for work hasn't just slowed down, it's actually started to reverse.
A massive part of this story is a wave of people leaving voluntarily. We're talking about an estimated 2.2 million self-deportations, plus another 675,000 formal deportations. You add those up, and the sheer scale of the outflow really starts to become clear. But this number, this is the one that really matters for our story. In 2025, 881,000 foreign-born workers didn't just become unemployed, they left the labor force completely. This is the key to the whole illusion. It's not about who's working, it's about who's even being counted. Okay, so this brings us to the big aha moment. We're going to break down how the unemployment rate is actually calculated and show you how a shrinking workforce can make that number look deceptively good. First things first, you have to know what the labor force is. It's not the entire population, no. It's only the people who are either working or are actively looking for a job. And that second part, actively looking, is absolutely crucial. If you're not looking for work, you don't count. And here's the trick. When someone gives up on their job search, maybe they're discouraged or they're retiring or, in this case, leaving the country, they are not counted as unemployed anymore. They just poof, vanish from the calculation. They get removed from both the top number, the unemployed, and the bottom number, the total labor force. This chart just illustrates it perfectly. In scenario A, the healthy economy, people find jobs. The rate falls. Awesome. But now look at scenario B, the shrinking workforce. Here, 5 unemployed people just leave. They drop out of the labor force. No new jobs are created, but the unemployment rate still goes down. It's a quirk in the math that can hide some serious weakness. So this isn't just some statistical curiosity, right? A smaller workforce has major real-world consequences for the entire economy. It basically puts a new, lower speed limit on how fast the country can grow. And this table just lays it out in black and white. You can see, while the native-born labor force was growing, the foreign-born labor force shrank dramatically. There are those 881,000 people who just vanished from the count. This is what's driving the whole contraction. And you can't just assume that one group of workers can seamlessly step in and replace another. It doesn't work that way. In sectors that rely heavily on immigrant labor, think agriculture, construction, hospitality, you end up with what are called structural labor mismatches. The skills, the pay expectations, where the jobs are, it just doesn't always line up. The ripple effects from this are serious. A smaller labor force means the economy's potential growth, its GDP, is lower. It creates these stubborn labor shortages in key industries, and it forces us to completely rethink what a normal jobs report even looks like. A monthly gain of 20,000 jobs, or even a loss of 20,000, might just become the new normal. And this brings us to the biggest risk of all. Misreading these signals isn't just an academic debate. It could actually cause policymakers, especially at the Federal Reserve, to make a huge mistake that ends up hurting the economy.
Here's the danger. The Fed sees that low unemployment rate and thinks, whoa, the economy is overheating. There's too much demand chasing too few workers. And their first instinct is to worry about inflation.
And that one misinterpretation could send them down a really dangerous path. They see the low rate, they assume it means high demand, so they decide to keep interest rates high to cool things off. But in reality, the problem isn't too much demand, it's a lack of supply, a lack of workers. So by keeping rates high, they risk choking off an economy that's already struggling and could even tip it into a recession.
There's a quote from the source material that just sums it up perfectly. Sometimes the labor market looks tight because the room itself has grown smaller. It's not that there are more people packed into the room, it's that the room itself, the entire labor force, has shrunk.
So the big takeaway from all this is that with any economic number, the story behind it matters just as much, if not more, than the headline. A falling unemployment rate isn't always good news. You have to pop the hood and see if the engine is actually getting more powerful or just smaller. And that leaves us with a final thought, right? Now that you know how to look for the story behind the number, it makes you wonder, what other headlines out there might be telling a very different story once you start digging just a little bit beneath the surface?